Hey, welcome back to the Female Founder World podcast. It's Jasmine. I'm the host of the pod. And today I'm joined by the co-founder of Blueland, Sarah Paiji Yoo. And okay, so you know her from Blueland. That is the company on a mission to end single-use plastic that I think Sarah's best known for. But she's a serial entrepreneur. She's got multiple successful businesses under her belt. And so there's a ton that we can learn from her in this conversation. Before we get into the episode, I do have a quick note from our sponsor of the show, Gorgeous.
Paying attention to the customer experience. We aim to deliver every single time, and being customer focused is really daring to be different. We first and foremost listen to our customers and always remember that customer perception is reality. Our demographic is Gen Z, and this is the I expect a response now. I call them the now customer. Our CX teams engage across every single channel. It is very important that we meet our customers where they are, and Gorgeous allows us the opportunity to be efficient with all of these channels located in one place. We show up to work each and every day with one goal in mind, and that is to provide the best customer experience for our customers all over the globe. I have a quote, and I always tell our CX leaders that customer experience is the heart of an organization, and we pump the blood and deliver the oxygen to the vital organs in the business to help them thrive and grow stronger. So AI and tech have played a large piece in a lot of the decisions that we've made at Princess Polly over the last year and going forward that we will make when it comes to utilizing systems to their fullest optimization. I will share that late last year, for example, we migrated ticketing platforms from the very popular Zendesk to Gorgeous because it is the experience that we're focused on, the agent experience and the customer experience. If you're interested in learning more about Gorgeous, you can go to gorgeous.com and start a free trial today.
Sarah, welcome to the Female Founder World podcast. We're so happy to have you.
Yeah, so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
We're going to get into what you're doing at Blueland. That is the crux of what we want to talk about today. But you're one of the actually quite few founders who has been on the show that comes from kind of that McKinsey MBA background. And I'm so interested in what your path was to entrepreneurship, because I know you've started multiple businesses.
Well, I have been a serial entrepreneur for over the past decade, which is crazy. Blueland's actually the fourth brand that I've had the pleasure to launch. I actually started my career extremely traditionally on the business side. Like you mentioned, I actually started my career at McKinsey, which is a management consulting company. I was in their New York office. And after 2 years of consulting, I also did 2 years of finance in private equity at a firm called Berkshire Partners. And I am so grateful for those experiences. When folks do come to me asking about if I would do it again, I absolutely would. I think for me, I think those traditional experiences were helpful in both confidence building as well as helping me develop a really strong foundation in business and getting really good exposure to both a range of different companies in different industries, as well as develop a really intimate understanding of like the different functions within business. I think at least for myself, had I gone into a specific field early on in my career, I don't think I would have had the pleasure to work within a financial services company and also with a retail company and a consumer products company and a tech company, and just to see what the implications are on a business when you have that different kind of focus. Because business is such a big general term. And I think also from a function perspective, like through consulting, because my experience at McKinsey, for example, I was taking on projects that typically lasted, 3 to 6 months per project. And so I really also got to try different projects in different functions, from HR to finance, to marketing, to, product development and supply chain. And again, I felt like that, gave me the ability to really take a really close look and develop a much deeper understanding of what those functions entail to help me just figure out also long-term, like what interested in me and what areas that I may want to spend the rest of my life in. And so, yeah, very grateful to that set of experience. But it's also very clear to me in consulting, for example, that as much as I valued that experience and I loved it and I learned so much and I had a lot of fun, it also became very clear to me that I wasn't a lifelong consultant. I think for me, both consulting and finance, which are both services industries, for me, while I valued being able to like jump in and work on really interesting, impactful problems, it was unsatisfying for me to then like, provide a recommendation, do all this work, provide a recommendation that we believed in, and then leave the company and say, okay, good luck,
Mm.
execute. And that's when I also realized during consulting that long term, I probably would want to be deep in a business where I also then had the agency to drive decisions that I thought were
Yeah.
impactful.
That makes sense. I also read that taking time off from work to go and do your MBA was a really pivotal moment in you kind of starting your own business. What was the thinking behind that? Why did you decide to go back to school?
Yeah. So my reasons for getting an MBA are actually quite different. I feel like from most people's. Like I went into it with the primary objective was to take a break, to get credit for that break, and really create space to explore and really figure out ideally what I want to spend sort of the rest of my career doing. And when I made the decision to go to business school, I was working in finance, I was working a lot. And again, I knew that long term, it wasn't going to be a fit. But I think I recognized it was really hard to be working a very intense job and at the same time, very effectively trying to explore what it was that I wanted to do. And a lot of times, at least for me, I have to have a lot of conversations and ideally even like have an internship, which is what like business school also provided, give me a summer to take on an internship. And so business school seemed like a great way to kind of like take a bit of a break, but
I
also
love
get
that
credit
business
for
school's
that
a
break.
break.
Yeah.
Business school's a break, a break for you. I've never heard it put that way before. That's amazing. I feel like that speaks very specifically to your character. And then, so, okay, you started your first business, Snapper, while you were in business school in your first year. How did that happen? What was Snapper? What were you doing there?
Yeah. So the other thing to mention is, leading up to business school, I had never considered myself entrepreneurial. I actually had never imagined myself starting something. I had always kind of assumed that that was going to be too risky for me. I was so fortunate to get to Harvard Business School at a time when there was such a strong track record of female founders coming out of HBS, having started successful businesses. So from the Guilt Group founders to Rent the Runway to Bobble Bar to Learn Best to Stitch Fix. Katrina was just a
Hmm.
year ahead of me. And that was really inspirational to me. I really do, that statement of like, you can't be what you can't see, like
Yes.
really resonates with me. And I think for the first time, like it really demystified it for me. I think prior to that point, I thought like, oh, this is not something that I can do. Like whether I don't have the experience or the set of skills needed, or it's too much risk for someone like me. And I remember very clearly when Jenny Fleiss from Rent the Runway actually came back to HBS and I was a student there and she shared her story. And that truly just broke it down for me. Like they had this idea for Rent the Runway, and how they got started is they just like bought all these dresses and started just like loaning them out to sororities and then dry cleaning them, and just it was just this very manual test. And then when I heard that, I was like, oh, I get it. Like these are like the steps that it takes to build something. I can do that too. And so that was really exciting for me. And I did go into business school thinking that like some of the criteria that was important for me for a future job, like the elements that I did love about consulting and finance, is I wanted to be in a fast-paced environment where I could have
Hmm.
exposure to larger things, and I was working on hard problems, but that I would have, a lot of scope. And it was interesting because for the first time I realized like, oh, startups actually also check those boxes. And so I decided, because I was risk averse, I decided like I should start something in business school. And again, like many of these female founders, like Katrina from Stitch Fix and Jen and Jenny from Rent the Runway, started their businesses in business school. And I always, at that point, I thought like I would never be the type of person to like leave a job and like take that risk of like then not making income to pursue an idea. And so I thought like, oh, business school is a great time to try to see if I can get something off the ground. So yeah, I kind of set that goal for myself early on in business school to see if I could start a company in business school. And that's how Snapback came about. I definitely have a lot of thoughts on starting a business, partly with the goal of like starting a business. I have a lot of watch outs there for sure. But that definitely was part of where my initial exploration came from.
What are those lessons? I have to ask. I'm curious about your thoughts about starting a business because you are interested in entrepreneurship rather than necessarily the problem that you're solving.
Yeah, yeah. I think for that, it's the thing that doesn't sink in for a lot of people and certainly hadn't for me is like starting a business, like that commitment, it does feel like you're becoming a parent, right? Like that is a
Mhm.
baby that you are putting out into the world. And it's in that way, like it can be all encompassing and it can be a very long-term commitment. And it can be one that you feel like you have to stick with to just see it through to the end regardless of what happens. And so, I do have, a good group of female founder friends, and some of them have been running their businesses for at this point 10, 15 years, and the journey is not easy, and especially if you're venture backed, it can be and feel like a very 24/7 type of commitment. So I do think you really want to make sure that the business is something that you're deeply passionate about, and that's something that you really do believe has a lot of long-term potential. Because I think even if you went into it with the mentality of like, okay, we're going to launch it and we'll see, like it's hard to have like 100% certainty, like is this a business and is this something that I'm going to still be passionate about in 10 years, and can I take this all the way? But I think the emotions behind it kind of is like having a child. I think even if when things aren't going well, I think it's hard for a lot of founders to then just call it. And so, it is a big commitment and something that, oftentimes like you're going to want to stick with through thick and thin.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned some of your friends who are founders who've been working on businesses for 10 to 15 years, but you were working on Snapback for only a couple of years before you were acquired. And I also read that you handled the acquisition process yourself. And so I want to talk about that. But first of all, what was Snapback? What were you building there? Why was it special? And why was it acquired in 2 years?
So Snapbet was a mobile app that helps shoppers find products in stores around them. And so the idea for Snapbet came to me because when I got to business school, that's the first time I got an iPhone. So that was 2010. Lots of people were making predictions on how we'd be spending way more time on our phones than our computers. But at that point, it was still unfathomable. Like the time spent on the internet on the phone was still 10%, and our phones were a lot smaller than we even know them today, and certainly were a lot slower as well. But I finally switched over from my BlackBerry to an iPhone. A lot of people at the time, app stores were really popular. People were getting iPhones for the first time and trying to like discover like
Mhm.
what kind of apps did they want to download. And that's when I got that experience, I was like, oh my God, like we are now all walking around with very powerful computing devices. And it made me think a lot about like what are problems that exist today that could be solved with the fact that we're essentially walking around with a laptop. And I thought about shopping and how shopping search had come such a long way, where if I had like a party this weekend where I needed a white dress, like you can find options in your size at your price point on Google, but you can be smack in the middle of Soho in New York and have so many options around you, but still not have a sense of like what's where in your size, like
Mm.
on sale. And so, yeah, that was the, quote unquote problem. Because I can't say it's like a problem, but that was the task that we were trying to tackle. And so, yeah, we partnered with several hundred of the nation's largest retailers and brands to ingest their local product inventory and make that available to our app users right on the phone, so that they can be somewhere and they could explore, they could filter and see what was around them. They could get sale notifications when they were nearby a store, etc. So that was Snapbet. From a timing perspective, we were really lucky as well, because from the time we started Snapbet to the time we sold Snapbet, that percentage increase of mobile share of even shopping it was starting to explode. And so a lot of retailers as well as shopping search engines were starting to see that like very quick shift to mobile, and realizing they didn't have any in-house mobile development capabilities or marketing capabilities. And yeah, we ended up starting to get inbounds into the business, expressing interest in buying the business about 2 years in.
Incredible. For those folks who are listening who are maybe at the stage where they are thinking about maybe it's time to think about selling the business or they're being approached about an acquisition, you've handled that process yourself. What did you learn? What can you share? What are the watch outs and the lessons from doing that?
Yeah, definitely a handful. I think something someone said to me once that really resonated through that process was that companies are bought, not sold. I think that, I think we were fortunate to get a handful of inbounds. And so that put us in a really strong position. Then at that point, when it became clear to me that it was the right time, obviously, like supply and demand in a sale process, the more interested buyers you have, the higher price you can demand. And so once I started to see, like, once people reached out, once we decided like, okay, this might be the time to sell, I then went out to try to drum up more demand and interest in purchasing the business. And I would say that was an interesting learning experience for me, because I think even with SnapBet, I had very robust decks on why, different folks should want to own an asset like our business. And that was, I would say, a largely unsuccessful exercise. I think we got one more person interested, but I definitely talked to a lot more people. But it all makes sense. I mean, you talk to these companies, and some were like very large, like they have their priorities, right? And their
Mm,
goals set for the year. Even though like what you have to offer is compelling, like especially anyone, oftentimes you're looking at acquire, like acquire is going to be usually an organization of some size and structure and processes. Just because it would be interesting and additive does not mean that like they will reorient their priorities and be able to get sort of that buy-in to make, like, unless like something that you're going to provide would already happen to be on their roadmap and something that they wanted to achieve in the next year or two, it's highly unlikely. But that said, we did get one additional, party interested and involved in the process. So I think that did overall help the process. So one learning definitely is like when it does come time to potentially sell, just make sure you're talking to more than
mm.
one person. I think that just creates urgency, it creates competition, it creates, I think, a much higher likelihood you're going to be able to get a better price for your business.
That's a great tip. And I can't believe we're moving on to another business where you were a founding partner before we even get to your company now, Blueland. But you went on to work for or join a company called Launch. You were, I think it was a founding partner. And that company was responsible for launching brands like Blueland, Rockets of Awesome. You were the CMO at some of those brands as well. I want to understand what you were doing there. Was it like an incubator program? What were you doing there?
Yeah. So Launch was a startup studio. I was a founding partner. And as I had a 1 year lockup with Price Grabber, which was the company that acquired SnapBet, as did my whole team. And, initially I was so excited. I was so optimistic about what that was going to be. And they were fantastic partners. It was just a much larger organization. So it was hard for me to adjust from like being able to move very quickly to all of a sudden thinking in terms of like 18-month roadmaps, which is completely appropriate for a company of that size. And I think for me, I had also just like learned so much and had so many failures with SnapBet. I was kind of dying to do it again, like get back into early stage company buildings. I really viewed SnapBet as my first act. And I was like, I'm going to do so much better the next time around. But I didn't have an idea. And right around that time, Ben Fishman, who was a friend from the industry, he had sold Rulala, which was first ever flash sale sites in the US. He had just sold, and he and we both had the shared thesis that we were still in very early innings of direct to consumer. So this was 2013. Warby Parker was kind of like the only
Mhm.
example of D2C. But I think we, as well as many people, start to believe like, oh my God, we're going to start seeing whole industries start moving direct to consumer, selling online. And so we raised some money with that thesis and with the goal of launching one business per year in the D2C space across different categories. And that it wouldn't be sort of like other founders, like we'd come up with those ideas in-house, and then we'd start building out those businesses in-house, and then build out teams, and then eventually sort of build out external management teams. And we thought that because all the businesses we build were in D2C, there'd be a lot of shared infrastructure or things that we could benefit from. But yeah, it was the idea for Launch, and that's what we did. We, at least during my time there, we did launched 4 businesses in 4 years. So one every year.
Wow.
Yeah. It was an incredible experience. And I definitely cut my teeth launching new brands and bringing new products to market.
And so this brings us finally to Blueland. And I'm wondering how the idea for this business came about and how you kind of transitioned out of launch into running your own company again, your own brand.
Yeah. So, kind of similar to business school, you'll find this theme where I am a believer of focus and like time and space. I feel like I go through periods of my life of like extreme like intensity, but I
Mhm.
recognize that sometimes in that it's hard for me to then like explore other things or really like pull back and pull out. And so 4 years into launch, I also became pregnant and I became a new mom. And I was very open to my relationship with work changing and evolving. I did wonder on the other side of parenthood if I would still have the same desire to spend as much time as I was building new companies, because especially when you're building early stage companies, it just requires like a different level of commitment because you don't have like the resources or the team, and there's no like roadmap. Like you're really just trying to like figure it out.
Mhm.
And then I had my son, and for better or for worse, I realized I still loved working. I still loved early stage company building, but I also really needed more from my work. Like I just developed a deep seated desire to do work that was more personally meaningful. I think just the challenge at that point, the challenge and the excitement and the energy from like launching a new brand or product to the market, like that alone wasn't enough. Because at that point, I had done it so many times.
Mm.
And at that point, I started to question, like, what else? Like, what else can I be doing? How can I tie it back to my role as a mother? And just some of it was just hard. I think whether it's, in beauty or in fashion, I was launching, we were coming out with new products very often. And I, like you mentioned, like I was as the CMO of many of these brands. And as a marketer, I just started to question, like, do our customers really need, right, more beauty products? Or do they really need another pair of shoes? And so, yeah, I had a lot of these big existential questions. And I just realized I couldn't, I couldn't I needed time and space to figure all of that out. So I ended up taking a sabbatical. Actually, I ended up taking almost like another year off on the back of my maternity leave.
Mhm.
And at that point, I wasn't looking to start another business for sure. At that point, I was just looking to spend time with my family, step back, and just reflect more upon like what was important to me, what would energize me going forward. And yeah, it was during that period I became passionate about just as an individual leading a more eco-conscious lifestyle. I was living a pretty close to zero waste lifestyle at home, and yeah, it was during that period that the idea for Blueland came to me.
You've done this so many times, and I want to understand what your playbook is for launching a new, like, what are the first things that you go through to, first of all, I guess, validate the idea, but then also get things off the ground? What is that process for you now that you've done
Yeah.
it countless times?
Yeah. I mean, validating the idea, that is the most important critical piece. I think both, ensuring that, what the area that you're exploring, something that you're passionate about and that you could be passionate about still in 10 years and 20 years is important, but also just validating the idea to make sure the business has the legs for you to be able to work on it for that long and feel like it gets to scale, at whatever scale it would be personally important for you to be exciting to get to. But I always spend a lot of time there. But like with Blueland, for example, the idea from Blueland came from this mission to eliminate single-use plastic packaging. So that was the goal. Like, I started to learn more about the state of our planet, started to, understand how much, plastic's contribution to climate change, the problem of plastic pollution, and realized when I drilled into plastic that packaging is the largest category of plastic waste. It's the largest use of plastic production. So I want to focus on plastic packaging. But that was it. I was agnostic as to like what the product would be, what the service would be. Like that was the goal. Like if the end goal is to eliminate single-use plastic packaging, like where's the best place to start? And so what we started with, it was actually toothpaste tablets. It was an idea that I was convinced was the best idea in the world. Like I loved the experience. I was so passionate about it because when I was trying to live a zero waste lifestyle, toothpaste tubes were one of the hardest things to avoid because toothpaste tubes at the time were an aluminum plastic blend. So you couldn't even recycle them. And so I started learning to make toothpaste tablets in my kitchen. And I thought they were great. Like, you chew, and then as soon as you start brushing with a wet toothbrush, you get just as much foam. I was very confident I can make them just as efficacious as the leading brands. But I think, a, a big thing to do is make sure to validate with other people. I think there are a lot of founders that get stuck in the trap of building a product or a service for themselves. And with every idea that I've had, and with that one, certainly, like for example, with toothpaste tablets, I had 40 friends and family try my toothpaste tablets for 2 weeks. I called them every single day to check in because I think your views on it can also change. And I was also interested in like, is day 1 weird, but is day 3 okay? And like, is day 10 like feels like normal, or is it weird the whole way through? And I set clear guardrails for myself. Like going into it, I told myself like metric for success would be that at least 25% of people would say like, yeah, I'd be open to switching, right? And that's like a pretty low bar. For toothpaste tablets, 80% of people said like, absolutely not. Like I would not switch. Like I would not I am not interested in making the switch. And so that was really helpful and clarifying. It was also really helpful that I set a line in the sand before I asked the question, because I think it would have been also easy for me to say like, well, 20%, like that's not bad. Like, is it good? Is it bad?
Yeah.
Like, it's all shades of gray. But, that's an exercise that we did with another set of products before we landed on cleaning.
That's a really interesting process. To set those guardrails beforehand, I think is a really valuable tip as well. So once you have your product, what is your strategy when you're talking about launch marketing? What's creating buzz now versus what was creating buzz 5 or 6 years ago?
Oh my God. The environment.
Things are changing.
Things are changing. Things are changing every year. And now I feel like it's accelerating. I feel like things are changing like every 6 months.
Yeah.
Like there's never a silver bullet. And even if you find something that works, you can't rest on your laurels, right? Like when I was getting started with startups, like Facebook was the place to be. And we all kind of know the state of Facebook now. And then Instagram really emerged as the platform where you could have great organic reach through your account, but also be able to work with a lot of influencers early days, even for free. Like if people truly loved your product, they would be much more likely than they are today to go out and gush about it and talk about it extensively. I would say, Instagram's a great example of, very proud of the presence that we've built there as a brand. But even that, as a lot of brands and influencers and influential accounts will attest to, I think even engagement on that platform is waning. Now there was that blip during, and I don't know if it's still a blip, to me it's a blip, but during the pandemic, like Clubhouse, all of a sudden it felt like Clubhouse is the place to be, and we certainly did things there during that time as well. We definitely took advantage of that, and now it's on TikTok. Like we are admittedly still trying to find our way. It's not clear. I don't think you can just play the Instagram. I mean, it is clear that it's not just the Instagram playbook, quote unquote, on TikTok. We're honestly still trying to figure out like where we fit in as a brand, because I do feel like, TikTok especially is a more creator, individual led platform, which is fantastic. But I think what I've mentioned does highlight we have leaned in places where there was a lot of organic word of mouth opportunity. Continue to believe that as a marketer, word of mouth is the best and most powerful form of marketing, outside of just having an incredible product or service. Like that is first and foremost, and obviously that then engenders really strong repeat as well as word of mouth. But have always believed in focusing on those fundamentals first and making sure to see signs of life there first before really investing in other channels like ads. Because it's definitely so much more powerful when other people are talking about you than when you're talking about yourself.
Yeah, that's a great tip. That's very true. Since you started launching D2C brands, that landscape has completely changed. Do you think that there's still space for new D2C e-com businesses to launch? Do you think that things are pretty saturated and pretty much done now? Where do you see opportunities at the moment for folks wanting to launch consumer brands?
I mean, I absolutely do think there's still opportunity for D2C brands. I think it really does come back to like delivering an incredible product or service that people love or need and really nailing that product market fit. So I think that part is extremely challenging, but I think for products that check that box, I still think that there's so much opportunity. I think definitely gone are the days, at least for now, where you could, quote unquote, growth hack your way into growth. Like have a product that was kind of middling, but be able to take advantage of low cost advertising or low cost or free
Mm-hmm.
influencers to get to a certain size or scale. I think those days are gone, but I think that's good. I think it's going to force more of a focus on higher quality products and experiences. I think absolutely you see a lot of brands going into physical retail, but there's still that benefit of, online, you're able to reach niche audiences everywhere, which is so hard to do
Mm.
locally. So I think to that extent, for a lot of products, there's something so powerful about being online that you can't do in physical stores. I mean, even you should think about like zero waste store concepts. I think those concepts are unfortunately still right now in time hard to support in most cities or most towns across America because there just may not be enough people that are passionate about that in a lot of locales across.
Sure. On a more personal level, I've been watching you and you've become this kind of climate activist, zero waste warrior, as well as this entrepreneur. And I'm wondering, in 10 years' time, let's say post Blueland, what are you going to be doing, do you think?
Yeah, it's funny because I've been thinking about that more these days. It's
Yeah.
funny because as I'm getting older, I feel like I'm thinking increasingly more about like, okay, now what do I want to be when I grow up? Which has been
Yeah.
nice and refreshing.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's good, and I think it comes from just like the confidence, right, of
Hmm.
getting older and seeing like, oh, I can do this, and I can do so much more than I thought I could do when I was younger. I don't know. I'm still exploring there for sure. I think with Blueland, unlike my other businesses before Blueland, I truly believe like Blueland is something that I can work on like forever. Like I
Hmm.
think I I worry about like ever having to like sell Blueland and being completely uninvolved because I don't think I'd be able to find another business as interesting or as personally meaningful or fun than Blueland. Because I do think there's so much that we can do and there's so much work left to do if you just think about consumer products generally and the mission to like eliminate single-use plastic packaging. Like
Yeah.
there is a lot there to tackle, and the innovation part of it has also been just like so fun and exciting to be able to go do and try to do the things that a lot of other people just think would be impossible. But that said, I am thinking also just more expansively about like beyond Blueland, are there other things that I'd want to get involved with? I think the past few years and even recent months and weeks have been tough to see, whether it's the shootings in Uvalde and Buffalo, and personally for me the reversal of Roe v. Wade.
Hmm.
And I don't know, even with climate change, a lot of times, often for us, it keeps coming back to the government and politics and just how large of a lever that is in driving change. And so thinking more about there, I do think that at minimum it is my responsibility to be more involved politically. And so and even with Blueland, as of 2 years ago we introduced like 2 civic duty days where we give folks 2 additional days off, and we really encourage them to take it too. Either just like take the day to like read up on issues, so understand how they might want to vote,
Love that.
to if they want to do something more proactive like phone banking or postcard writing, then that as well. But yeah, I've been thinking a lot about like how can I start supporting more candidates that I think can help drive a change. I've also started thinking like maybe I want to enter politics one day, though
Yeah,
that's
I can see
still
that for you.
ways away. Yeah.
I'm not allowed to vote in America, but if I could, I'd vote for you. The last question that I ask everyone on the show is for a resource recommendation. And that can be a book, a podcast, a community that you're part of, something that's helped you as you've been building your businesses.
From a book perspective, at least, yeah, for folks that are, just getting started, I thought Lean Startup was a really helpful framework. It's a framework that I've been using for sort of the past decade. And I found that it's a very, I guess, efficient and like platform that also really tries to drive that objectivity, which is hard. It's hard,
Mm,
especially when you might be so passionate about an area and, have, personally so much confidence that, this is the right idea, or may also have a strong desire to start your own thing. It provides good frameworks as to really try to suss out and drive insights as to how can you continue to improve the product or service idea that you have.
that's a great tip. That's a great book as well. I actually do have one more question for you that I
Yeah.
just thought of when you were talking there. And that's for people who are looking for that idea. They want to build something, they think that they have the skills to do it and the drive to do it. Coming up with the idea and finding that white space, are there any trends in how you see people putting that together? What do you think makes a good idea and how do people come across them? It sounds like such an elusive, intangible thing.
It is such an elusive and intangible thing. And having, been at a startup studio as well, where that was part of our goal, like unearthing
Mm,
opportunity. You would think that like maybe like a process of like selecting like really large industries and then like whittling down to like identifying like what parts of those industries haven't moved online, or like you would think that there would be an effective framework for like whittling down to opportunity. But I can't say that we were successful with that. And at least for us, and even for me with Blueland, the best ideas have come from like a personal pain point or passion. But that's not for everything. I think there's folks that can find success by taking a more structured route. And you hear that a lot with, these days, like Amazon
mhm.
entrepreneurs, where they're really looking at like, okay, where is there a lot of search, but not a lot of products, or a lot of search, but not a lot of products with high reviews.
Yeah.
So that definitely is a path. I think the only advice I'd give is just to make sure you put an overlay on that with sort of where your personal interests and passions lie. Because there are definitely opportunities that I've cited in the past, where like it was very clearly like not how I would want to spend my time, or just not my area of interest. So for example, like 7 years ago, I had the idea for a Botox bar, right? And
Mhm.
actually now we're starting to like see those pop up. Like I saw Dry Bar, and I like you see where the world's heading with the
Yeah.
Kardashians and other social media and everything. And I'm like, okay, like Botox bar. But and it was a large opportunity. Like many people saying like, I will give you money for that. Like you should do it. It's such a good idea. And I was like, is that how I want to spend,
Is that my
so many of my
legacy?
waking hours? Is that my legacy? Am I like, yeah. So, and it's also the kind of work you want to do. It's like, then it's like opening up a lot of studios,
Mhm.
and the studios will likely be with busy evenings and weekends too, if you want to accommodate like busy, parents or working women. And it's like, is that how I want to spend my evenings,
Mhm.
weekends? Also dealing with like a receptionist didn't show up today, like what? And it became very
Yeah.
clarifying when I played out like what my day to day would be. That just wasn't the type of work that I was most excited about.
Are there any opportunities out there that you're looking at and you're like, why hasn't anybody jumped on this yet? Like, this is an obvious thing that needs to be solved. And I'm putting you on the spot, but I need to ask.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all the time. I mean, there's definitely things on, I think a lot of parents can really relate. I think there's a lot of things you buy that are used for a very short period of time, especially when you have a child and that child's a baby. And it doesn't like I'm forgetting the name of there's like this pillow that you put the baby on. It's essentially a giant pillow that kind of grooves down in the middle, and you put the baby on. And I would say like, I feel like so many first time parents get that, and your baby can fit in that for maybe a month or 2 months max, and that's it. It's like a $200 pillow, or like a bassinet. Like the bassinet is a
Mhm.
perfect example of you really only use it for like 2 months max. And I just, I don't know. There just feels like there's a lot of waste and efficiency there. And at minimum, I wish that there was a way, a dream, if someone wants to build this, to connect parents with other families that maybe have children, a few months or like a year
Mhm.
behind them. And maybe these are, families in need that, I feel like that would be so amazing. Because again, we are going through so much stuff so frequently that I wish there was just like a clear place that, I could share those
Yeah,
products with.
that's a great idea. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been an incredible conversation and it's been awesome watching all of your success and what you're building at Blueland.
No, thank you so much for having me on. This was really fun.